Welcome to My Life, Chassidus Applied, episode 480. It's a special Israel at War and Yud Shevat edition. This program is in loving memory of Miriam Basi L'Gani Altes Aleh Shalom and Emerit Baruch ben Yamin ben Menucha Lana Altes, Yukasil ben Lei Rachel and Rachel Bas Liba Farkash, dedicated by Pinchas Toders ben Miriam and Sarah Bas Rachel Altes. Yud Shevat is this coming Shabbos. It would be 74 years from Tovshin Yud. Yud Shevat, Shabbos Parsha Boy, that Shabbos morning, Stalkus and Hilula of the Frierdiker Rebbe, Ba Shemesh, V'Zorach HaShemesh, and you have the beginning of the Rebbe's assumption to leadership as the seventh generation, Der Shvi, beginning immediately that Yud Shevat, but formally a year later. So we'll begin with talking about that. We'll also talk about the Parsha and lessons, and especially lessons regarding events going on in Eretz Yisrael, where our hearts and souls and prayers go out, especially to those that are being Moiser Nefesh, giving their lives, standing on the front lines, protecting innocent men, women, and children. Hashem should be Matzliach them. They should finally finish at complete Nitzachon, victory, the release of the hostages unscathed, and only Shalom Yisrael, v'nasati Shalom ba'aretz forever and ever with the coming of Moshiach. So we can say this class is dedicated, this program is dedicated also to that. And some other subjects, some painful ones, some other types of subjects that we will address as well, based on the recent events. So it should be a lively program, and this is a good opportunity to announce that ChassidusApply.com is the website, the landing page where you can find this and all previous programs, as well as a place to submit your questions completely anonymously at ChassidusApply.com. Find archives of previous programs as well as other resources around Chassidus and Chassidus-related materials. Okay. So I think the best place to begin is simply what is the central theme of Yud Shevat and Basi L'Gani, and what lessons do they offer us today? So the Rebbe gave us the direct answer to that question. We don't need to speculate or guess. The Rebbe said the first Maimer Basi L'Gani Tovshin Yud Aleph, and he made it clear, stated the mission statement of this generation, Der Shvi, which is alluded to right in the beginning of the Hemshech, Kol Hashvin Chavivin, Moshe Rabbeinu was the Der Shvi from Avram Avinu, and he brought down the Shechina all the way down Lamata, below, in this earth with V'Shachanti B'Seichem, with the building of the Mishkan. So too is it our job to finish the process that began 7 generations with the founding of Chassidus Chabad, the Alter Rebbe, in the 7th generation, and bring the geulah. So in a nutshell, essentially, Yud Shevat and Basi L'Gani capture the very mission of our time. And the whole Hemshech of Basi L'Gani, which we'll talk about some more, focuses on that mission. With all the details, sometimes you get caught up. It's important to state what is the central theme. So really, the day that Rebbe became Rebbe, which is the day of the Histalkus and Hilula of the Frierdiker Rebbe, captures what we're supposed to be doing today. Just finishing the job that began thousands of years ago and manifesting a Lakus godliness in this world, firstly in our own personal lives, in the battle with our animal soul and our bodies and the material world and all its temptations and distractions, and by extension, doing the same with everyone we come in contact with, Yafutza Meinesecha Chutza, spreading the wellsprings outward, transforming the shtus, the l'umazeh, the irrational tug of materialism of this world, to transform it to shtus the kedusha, to a super-rational commitment to the divine that goes beyond the structures and the rational logic of our systems. And by doing so, we fulfill the very purpose of Dira B'Tachtenu, Basi L'Gani Achesikala, come to my garden, What is my garden? My garden is the place where I began with. This was my bridal chamber, not L'Gani, L'Gnuni. It says L'Gani, which means L'Gnuni, which is our bridal chamber where the Shechina was resting on earth, but then due to the Chet Tzadas, that first state of dissonance, there was a disconnect. And then that just continued to grow in a negative way, more separation, more dissonance, until Avram Avinu reversed the process. And 7 generations after Avram, Moshe Rabbeinu reversed it all the way, and with the Mishkan, the Shechina came back to rest, but still on a temporary basis. Now our job is to do it on a permanent basis, once and for all. So the thousands of years of hard work have all been to refine this world. As he explains at length in Basi L'Gani, the very central theme, and as we know, the 20 chapters of the Hemshech that the Frierdiker Rebbe's Maimer, which was published and first learned on that Yud Shevat 74 years ago, that was also Shabbos Pasha Boy, that every year the Rebbe would explain one of the 20 chapters of this Hemshech, and then began that cycle again in 1970, after the first 20 chapters were finished, and in Tavshin Lamed finished, and then Tavshin Lamed began a second cycle, and so every year, this year, we're corresponding to chapter 14, which we'll soon discuss as well. So what are the lessons that it offers us? So firstly, it tells us very clear terms what our mission is. Everything we do is meant to finish the process and bring the geulah. That's our job, which means in every detail of life to recognize that it's not a self-standing entity, it's meant to be a channel of godliness in this world, a channel of goodness. And indeed, what you see, the Rebbe's grand plan, sending shluchim all over the world, making each of us a messenger, an ambassador of light, of bringing, like he says, that kadis kafre sitra achre, istali kikor de kutshebriche bekula almen, that by our battles and refraining from the negative and transforming the material of this world, matter, into spirit, into energy, we ultimately are mamshich, a level of Ein Sof, a transcendent level. So we're ambassadors of not just light, but the infinite light of the divine itself in this world. And we do so in a form of a battle. It's a battle with our animal soul. As he explains, as the Hemshech continues, the battle of Tzivus Hashem, we're called Tzivus Hashem, which is a pasuk used from Pasha Boy, when the Eden left Mitzrayim. Army of Hashem, with explanation that Sova has all the different meanings, but the simple and literal interpretation, we're warriors, we're battlers, spiritual war that we're fighting. And when it comes to a war, he says that the king, the leader, splurges, mevazbes kol ha'etzos, he splurges all his wealth, all the treasures, even those that were kept secret that no one had ever seen. And he himself sacrifices himself to win this war. That's the midas hanatzochin, to win against an opponent, against an enemy, brings out the deepest keiches. So how do you fulfill the nesava kodesh baruch hu liyis baruch dir b'tachtenim? God's desire, atzmus. Desire is dafke dir b'tachtenim, dafke in a dark world. To break and to transform the klippas is what the desire is. Not just to reveal the divine, that can be done in higher worlds, but to transform a world that is antithetical to godliness. That touches the core essence with the gili bizbuz ha'etzos midas hanatzochin. And what is that level of bizbuz ha'etzos? In the nimshal, in the moral, that's the highest levels of divine revelation and beyond divine revelation. As he continues to explain in the chapters after chapter 11 and 12 and 13 and 14 and on, that the divine is to be found everywhere. And ultimately, what we do is not just reveal the divine in everything, but we reveal levels that are beyond revelation, like the Eitzah that's completely concealed. The deepest levels in L'mayla Adein Ketz. And that's revealed specifically when there's with an enemy. Like we see, when there's resistance, it brings out our deepest resources. So there you have one of the most important lessons, especially for today. There are battles being fought all the time with the animal soul, with the material world. But now we have an actual war going on with enemies of Eden and enemies of Eretz Yisrael. We see the atrocities they perpetrated. So we're told, we're Tzivus Hashem, we go out into this battle, both the physical part of the battle and the spiritual part of the battle. And we're completely confident in victory because we're given those eitzes. And you see it. Look how what this adversity has done to Eden, how it's united, how it's brought out a deeper energy, deeper pride of being a Jew. And we fight the war, as I said, both materially and spiritually. So the message of Yud Shevat, the message of Basi L'Gani, fighting the battles, means spiritual battle, of course, with the Nefesh Abamis, with Shtus de Lumazeh, but also the real Shtus of this world, of Pera Odam, of wild, brutal savages who attacked Eden on Shmini Atzeres, Simchas Torah, in the most atrocious and most horrible fashion, horrific ways. But we're not perturbed because we know. We dig deeper and we find the Midas HaNetzachen, greater strengths, and the eitzes that the Eibishter gives us all the way from the highest levels of the divine. And the divine can be found everywhere. So that's some of the lessons that we learned from Yud Shevat and Basi L'Gani for today. So to go through a few other questions in this spirit, what lessons can we learn from Yud Shevat to help us navigate through the era of war and upheaval? Okay, we just answered that question. The Basi L'Gani and Yud Shevat talk about the battles. Obviously we would prefer it should only be spiritual, but sometimes not according to our plan. God sends us what we have to be, what He decides has to send to come out to our way. And we do what we have to do to overcome those challenges. But as I said, to become stronger than ever. Because the end story is not just that we go back to square one. That we come back to a place of, the hope is geulah mamish. We'll come back to a place that's even stronger than where we started off. Should Yud Shevat be celebrated with joy like Lag BaOmer? Instead of being sad, but like Rashbi asked about his Yahrzeit, it should be done with a simcha. So the Frierdiker Rebbe did not make any reference to it, so we don't know if he asked, has the Frierdiker Rebbe taught us that we should celebrate. But the fact of the matter, especially at Chassidus, the Yahrzeit of a Tzaddik, first year is one thing, but in the years later it's an aliyah. The neshama of the tzaddik, and then it goes up. His neshama is not limited by the body, and Poel Yeshua is b'kerev haaretz, and all the work that he did affects and brings salvations and redemptions in this world b'kerev haaretz, even in the abyss, even in the darkest part of the world. So that's something to celebrate. In addition, I should mention, if you look at a very interesting sikha, a powerful sikha, Shabbos Parsha Boy, Tovshin Lamed Vov, which is the Shabbos before Yud Shevat. So the Rebbe spoke about a sikha, he quoted a sikha from Shavuos Tafresh Tzadik Dalet. Apparently the Rebbe was there, because the Rebbe quoted it a number of times. I'm assuming, I can't say for sure. But the Rebbe quotes it also in Noyach Tavshin Chafei and Boy Tavshin Lamed Vov. He talks about the Koyach Kush Atzir the Frierdiker Rebbe spoke about. There are times when you're in a situation, it's important to close your eyes and imagine and envision, visualize things that happened years ago. So the Rebbe is saying that we should visualize what happened in Yud Shevat. And says clearly, not the negative, not the sad, the histalkus, but the contrary, how the neshama is eila and the neshama continues to give us keiches, and it should all come into Maaseh B'Peil. Worthwhile sikha to read, both Boy Tov Lamed Vov, as well as the original sikha in Shavuos Tafresh Tzadik Dalet. It's Likutei Deburim, and then reprinted in Sefer HaSichos Tafresh Tzadik Beis, Tafresh Tzadik Hey, which includes the sichas from Tafresh Tzadik Dalet. So there's an emphasis not on the sad, on the positive. So we can learn from that. But the key here is to be able to transcend time and space, to be transported to a place as if it's happening right now, to relive that power of Yud Shevat. And there's something about going back to the original moment, because the original moment affects us all emotionally. The Rebbe brings there from the Friedrich Rebbe a whole story with Yud Shevat, about Aid, who was once as a soldier in the army of the king, and he remembered years later what it was like when he saw the king for the first time, the trembling, the pachad, the reverence that he had, to the point that even though it was years later, he fainted. And the Rebbe brings that in the Sikha Shabbos Parsha Boy. That has to cause us fainting in a positive way, that we should be so taken that we lose ourselves in the connection that we have to Yud Shevat, which of course is the Stalkus of the Friedrich Rebbe and the beginning of the Nesius of the Rebbe. So Yud Shevat's a day for us to go into that place. It's like restating, revisiting the beginning of our mission of this seventh generation. Okay. Did the Rebbe ever explain why he waited a year to formally accept leadership? The Nesius. We know that the Rebbe resisted, even though he was requested by many. The Rebbe gave different answers, but bottom line, he resisted. We don't have anything official that I know of that the Rebbe ever explained why he did accept the Nesius the next year, especially when he said the Basi L'Gani, which is like the formal statement of assuming the leadership. So we can only speculate, or we don't even have to speculate, maybe not our business. I mean, we see that Rebbe Rashab officially did not accept Nesius immediately, even though in many ways behaved like a Nasi, as the Rebbe did as well in Tafshin Yud, after Yud Shevat. So I don't know if there's any reason to speculate. On a very simple level, Ein Melech b'lo Yam, perhaps it needs the Am to be Machter the Melech, meaning a real Asus L'Tata, and it takes time till the Rebbe felt that he had that so-called consensus, if you wish. Not Chas v'Shalom that anybody was not that way, but people have to adjust to it. That would be on a very balabatisha level. But regardless, it was a year later. That was the formal assumption, but we still come from Tafshin Yud. Because as we said, Zorach Shemesh U'Ba Shemesh, that when the sun sets, immediately the sun rises, the next generation. By Chassidim B'chal, it was known that in every second generation, it was never literally spelled out the transfer of power, so to speak, of leadership from one to the other. For example, Alter Rebbe to the Mittler Rebbe was very clear. The Mittler Rebbe Tzemach Tzedek was not. The Chassidim had to come, and there was a story with Acholim, Isha Kisazriya. Tzemach Tzedek gave a tzavot, said clearly the Rebbe Marash. The Rebbe Marash did not say clearly the Rebbe Rashab. The Rebbe Rashab, Friedrich Rebbe, was a Ben Yochid, and was also, everyone knew, he would be the next Rebbe. With the Rebbe, you don't have a Fedish, even though it was obvious to Chassidim. So is there something to be read into that? Sometimes you need more Asus L'Tata, sometimes more it's Asus D'Leila. You can explain it in many different ways. Bottom line is that we know that Rebbe's Nesius is built on Asus L'Tata, as he said many times, Shal Heva Seila Me'eleha. Einstein Feglich in Buzim, like the Rebbe said, Yud Shevat, 73 years ago, 73 years ago. Tafshin Yud Aleph after the Maimer. Don't deceive yourself into thinking I'm going to do the work for you. You have to do your work. And this was the central theme of the Rebbe's approach, is all this leadership. So perhaps that's part of the reason of the Deir HaShvi, because the ultimate Mamata L'Mayla. And now we see even more so after Gimel Tammuz. How Kavyochel, so to speak, there's so much a need for our initiative. So all that is emphasized perhaps in that element that the Rebbe did not just accept it, but it came through the initiative from below. Next question. What are the different explanations for the term Shechina? In the Rebbe's first Maimer explained the Friedrich Rebbe's Basi L'Gani Maimer, he explains in Tafshin Yud Aleph, a teaching of Yeshiva Rebbe explaining what the Shechina is and how it manifests in this world. Can Rabbi Jacobson please give a brief summary and explanation? Thank you. So, since it says right at the beginning of the Hemshech, Ika Shechina b'tachtenim Mesa, so the Rebbe touches upon what means the word Shechina. Shechina literally means Shechenes u'mislabeshes, that he manifests. He doesn't remain above and removed, but manifests, like v'shachanti b'seicham. But there he goes, from all the Rabbeim explains that Shechina can be used said on Malchus of Atzilus, and sometimes higher, all the way to the Kav, and all the way to Eid Ein Sof Lifnei Atzimtzum, Malchus of Ein Sof. The most likely reason that Rebbe brings that is not just to technically show that Shechina is on all levels, but to show that Shechina is a central theme in all of Chassidus, in all the Rabbeim. So since the whole theme of B'dei Hashvi is to bring the Shechina Lamata, and the Medrash, what's the Medrash say? That after the Chet Dika Shechina b'tachtenim, so the Shechina was here below, in a seamless way connected to this world, but then Chet Tzadas, and then the subsequent 7 generations, all caused the Shechina to elevate, which means to be concealed. To the Ki Hashvi, to the Ki Hashishi, the 7th heaven, to the 6th, to the 5th, to the 4th, until Avraham reversed the process and began bringing it back down, and Moshe v'shachanti b'seicham. So Shechina plays a tremendously central role in the very purpose of existence and in the very understanding of making a dira b'tachtenim. That's our work. And that's the work of this generation. So the Rebbe is explaining from all the Rabbeim on all the levels that when you make Shachanti B'Seichim, you're drawing down from the highest all the way down below. And especially if we look in the chapters of Basi L'Gani in these years, meaning in later chapters 10, after chapter 10, 11, 12, we're now in chapter 14, you also see the idea of bringing down Eid Ein Sof, Lamata Mata Adin Tachlis, and also Lamai Lamala Adin Ketz, which means to bring the Shechina all the way into this existence here, that wherever we look, every fiber of existence has the divine within it. So that's a brief summary of that and the central theme that's connected to the central theme. Can the idea of transforming matter into divine energy be compared to Einstein's first law of thermodynamics? What is that first law of thermodynamics? It says that energy cannot be created or destroyed. It can only change from one form to another. In spiritual terms, can this be an example of what Chassidus teaches is our job, which is not to destroy evil energy, but to transform it into good energy? As the Tanya says, we can work on our Nefesh Habamis to make it want to use its energy to serve Hashem. And in the theme of Basi L'Gani, it's exactly the point. Atzei Shittim, which is the Mishkan, the Shechanti B'Seichem was through Atzei Shittim. Shittim also comes from the word Shtus, to take from the Shtus de L'umazeh, the irrationality that's beneath reason in human behavior when it follows its desires. It doesn't make sense, as he explains in Basi L'Gani. But people follow it. It's a temptation. It seduces us. And transform that into Shtus de Kedusha, into a super-rational passion for godliness, for transcendence. So that's changing the animal soul, transforming it, not just eliminating it, like he explains in the Hemshech. So someone's asking, the answer is absolutely. It's an example. The example of turning matter into energy. The only distinction I would make is that in the law of thermodynamics, you can't create something new. You're just continuously converting one form to another. Whereas through Avedus Hashem, you're actually generating new energy. An energy that was not here before. But the idea of transforming matter to energy is exactly the point. That's what the Mishkan was. Took a physical objects, gold, silver, copper, and the other materials, aseshitim, cedar wood, and other materials, and turned it into a holy place, a sacred place. So the answer is absolutely yes. So now let's move to the actual chapter 14 in Basi L'Gani. What can we learn from chapter 14 of Basi L'Gani about today's war? So I said it briefly earlier, and let's go over it again. And that is because we're talking here about the Eitzes, the whole period of Lamata Mata Aden Tachlis, comes to prepare us to understand Lamayla Mata Aden Ketz. Like he says, the Eitzer, the treasure, the hidden treasure, is higher than Gili Erein Sof. So Lamata Mata Aden Tachlis sets the stage because it shows us there's godliness everywhere. That's essentially once he begins in chapter 12 and 13 and now 14. In chapter 15, next year's chapter, he's going to talk about, now that we understand Lamata Mata Aden Tachlis, that in every detail of existence, Elokus permeates everything, even in klippas, even in negative places. And even in klippas, not just a conceal on God, but even klippas that are man-made, meaning a person does Rachmana litzlan a sin. Even in that, there is the divine. Va'ata machayas kulam, as he explains. And we're not just talking about the divine atzmus that creates everything. We're talking about the divine even as it relates to existence. There's also, to say atzmus is everywhere, eined milvadi, my kamashmala. But va'ata machayas kulam means that also divine revelation is everywhere. Because atzmus you could say is there, but it's not revealed. But you can say, no, the divine revelation is everywhere, if you dig deep enough. So all this is coming to teach us how to fight the war. Because when you're dealing with this world and you look around, you see a world. The divine is concealed. You have people saying, Aniva Avsiyed, me and nothing else. They go that's antithetical to godliness. So you can become a Jewish, you can become depressed, you can become resigned into thinking, how can I reveal God in a place like this? And even if yes, I can do it in a Beis Medrash, a Beis HaKnesses, in a holy place. But in the material world, look what's going on in this world. The confusion, the darkness, where people think darkness is light and right is wrong and wrong is right, and good is evil and evil is good. Comes the Maimon and says, no, Elokus is everywhere. Everything was created, and therefore Lamata Mata Aden Tachlis, Lamata Mata to the lowest levels. Even when something seems completely antithetical to the divine, there's also godliness there. There's ways how you deal with it. Certain things are not supposed to be touched if possible. Shalosh klipos hatmeis. But the areas that we could get involved in directly, Shalosh klipos hatmeis, we elevate by avoiding it. Or if Rachmana litzlan, someone did fall there, you could always do tshuva. The rest of the world can also be dealt with because godliness is everywhere. So all this is helping us fight the battles of life. You could think, look what's going on. Look what happened on October 7th, as they call it. Shmini Atzeres. Such atrocities would demoralize and completely disorient anyone. And yet, we come with the strength of Am Yisrael Chai, of Ani Hashem Leisha Nisi, like he explains in chapter 14, that Lakus, as it comes down, is not affected by this world. It doesn't get, even if it engages, it doesn't get affected because it doesn't get misadev mixed into it. It remains always above. So you always have that energy, that no matter what you're dealing with, even the darkest of the dark, you can find the Lakus. Sometimes you have to deal, obviously, with an enemy and destroy the enemy. But ultimately you find the good because it's stronger than the dark. And as such, it gives us the strength to fight every battle. And that leads us, not only can you find godliness everywhere, but you also find the eitzes of the Helam Ha'atzmi, the Maila Maila, Helam Achad Helam, that's beyond revelation altogether. So the very darkness itself is also a part of the gift that we're given. So the lessons to our time are very clear. Couldn't be more apropos. That even when we're facing some of the darkest of the dark, barbarians, savages have done what they did, without going into details, we still come and know that Lamata Mata Aden Tachlis, Bekedav Ha'aretz, even in the darkness, there's Elokus. And we have the Eitzes with us. So that's the most blatant lesson that we learn from chapter 14 regarding the battle to today's war. Now, we talked about the seventh generation, so let's go back to that some more. So someone quotes a sikha from Yud Shevat, the Yud Shevat Yud Nun. Do we have to wait 40 years for the geulah, like the 40 years in the wilderness, before entering the promised land? And more detail. Can Rabbi Jacobson please explain the sikha the Rebbe said in Yud Shevat Tavshin Nun 5750? I think the Rebbe said that after Hashem told Moshe it's been enough time on the mountain and it's time to enter Israel, it still took another 40 years until they actually entered, because they needed 40 years to absorb and actualize all the Torah they learned on Har Sinai. At the end of Pashik Savi, he says, when Moshe says to the Eden that now you have a lev ladas, v'nayim lides, v'nayim l'shmaya, after 40 years you come to appreciate and be able to absorb and integrate everything that you experienced. The Rebbe also said that Moshe Rabbeinu of this generation is saying enough time in Golus already, and now it's time to enter Israel with Moshiach. Since the Rebbe said this 34 years ago, because now we're in Tavshin Pei Daled, does it mean we still have to wait another 6 years for Moshiach? Absolutely not. First of all, the Rebbe also brought 40 years regarding Tavshin Nun is 40 years from Tavshin Yud. And he says clearly in that sikha that even though not everybody was born, there were people born after Tavshin Yud. And same thing you could say about in the Midbar. When it says, when Moshe says after 40 years in the wilderness, what about those that were born in the middle of in the Midbar itself? They didn't go through the 40 years. So the Rebbe answers, it's from a sikha from Yud Beis Tammuz Tov Shechov Zayin, because there's some people in the generation that were there for 40 years. So they could teach those that weren't there what they learned. So you see from that, you don't have to wait the 40 years. We already have the 40 years many times over. Which brings us back to Deir Hashvi. Now, when the Rebbe said Deir Hashvi in Basi L'Gani, he's talking about this generation. That is be the last generation of Golus and the first generation of Geulah. So, in that context, someone asks, when does the seventh generation end? It's clear that in the Basi L'Gani Maimer that the Frierdiker Rebbe said the seventh generation will bring Moshiach, but what's not the Rebbe actually said it. But what's not completely clear, what is a generation? How long does a generation last? Will there be an eighth generation? How would we know when it would begin? So this is a question I've addressed a number of times. And I can't tell you that necessarily I have the exact answer, but the Rebbe said it, that we know that's a given. Moshiach, in the full sense of the word, is not here yet. And he said it would be here. So we have to say the seventh generation is as long as we have the Rebbe's students, the Rebbe's Chassidim, who are continuing his work, we are doing the Rebbe's work, the Deir Hashvi work. The fact that more children were born, and it's a few years past, yes, of course we would have loved the Deir Hashvi to be the geulah that is of Deir Hashvi to have happened in Tavshin Nun, Tavshin Chof, and Tavshin Lamed, Tavshin Mem. But as long as we're here, it continues the Deir Hashvi until the geulah comes. Ayah starts going halachic, when does a deir begin, deir end? I find these type of discussions theoretical, but my nafkamina b'poel. We have work to be done. So I find it just to be a distraction. Is it an interesting question? It's an interesting question, but you may not have a full answer. So I'm completely satisfied to say that we're the Deir Hashvi. I was the Deir Hashvi 30 years ago, 40 years ago, 50 years ago. I didn't change personally. See, Einstein, you'll say after Me'ev Esrim Shana, what happens? So we'll talk about it then. Right now, there's a Deir Hashvi alive and kicking in a good way, and doing its work, and that's what we have to know, that we are the Deir Hashvi, the seventh generation from the Alter Rebbe. You don't have another generation. Seventh Nasi from the Alter Rebbe is the Rebbe, and the Rebbe continues to lead and work through us. Mazari b'chaim. Afu b'chaim. So that's our work. That's how I would respond to that. And it's based on, again, what it says in the Maimorim, it says in all the sikhs that the Rebbe talks about this. How do we know Mashiach is almost here? Or someone puts it this way, please give some inspirational words how we know Mashiach is almost here. I'll just repeat the Rebbe's words. To me, that's sufficient. All the simonim, as the Rebbe says. Firstly, the Gemara says, Kol kitzin ve'ena davar tolei ela b'tshuva. All the kitzim, all the deadlines have been met, and now it's only dependent on tshuva. And then the Rebbe says, and we were told that we did tshuva already as well, through everything that we went through. And then the other simonim that you have, and the Masechta Seita and other places that talk, they all fulfilled. And just for the record, it's not just the Rebbe that says it. There's a sefer called Ikvsim the Moshiach by Rabbi Elchanan Wasserman, a student of Chafetz Chaim, where he describes it in detail. There's others as well, different Chassidus Rebbes and leaders. So that's known. Then there's the things that Rebbe spoke about, opening our eyes, seeing the advances of technology, of politics, of freedoms, of how Jews are free. Signs after signs, the fall of the Soviet Union, the Persian Gulf War, the Midrashim, Yalkut Shmeini, and other places. Does that mean that we are there yet? No, there are setbacks. As the Rebbe says, the progression is toward the geulah, but there are dips. But generally speaking, is going there and getting there closer and closer. And there are many things you can see today that we take for granted. I mentioned before, it never had unprecedented that we have such freedoms. Either there's a war in Gaza. I'm not dismissing that. I'm not minimizing it. There's anti-Semitism. But as the Rebbe said, put him Tavshim Zayin, that too. The fact that we see things, and some people say, look, it's confusion, gender confusion, confusion about morality, moral compass is lacking. That's also part of Yizbaru v'Yislam Nadvarim. It's also a simon. Listen to the last sikh and put him Tavshim Zayin. The clarity. And by the Rebbe, it's not a force of evil, it's an absence of good, an absence of knowledge, ignorance. Teneka shenishbu. So I can go on, but bottom line is, we are in a time unprecedented. We have the capacity naturally to achieve Mola Oris De'es Hashem Kamayim Li'amachasim. Technology allows us that. No one can, that is unheard of. So the only thing that's missing is me and you doing what we have to do. The pipelines are laid out. We have the Chassidus. We have the Meinesecha. We have the Chutzah who's receptive. The Rebbe says the world is ready. And you see it more than ever now. The Jewish world and the non-Jewish world. What's lacking is the Yafutzu in the broadest possible manner of reaching. So it's Mechusa Maisa, Mechusa Zman. It requires work, and that's why we have our work cut out. The Rebbe said, can't. Do everything you can. So I am inspired by that. That's what drives the work I do. I do this program, other programs, and I see it has the effect. But we all have to feel this way, and I know many thousands of people do that. That's shluchim everywhere. But we have to continue to forge ahead and know for sure that this milchama will be won on all levels, spiritual and physical. And we're literally at the threshold. We do our part, it can tip the scales and bring the geulah. Do we see today signs of Mashiach's coming? So I just described some of them, but let me just read a few more questions in that regard that maybe helps. Is there a Torah teaching that during the era of Mashiach there will be more justice in the world? If so, last week there was another big step toward justice, proving we are so close to Mashiach's coming, with the courts releasing the names of the billionaires and politicians who visited Epstein's Island and abused children there. Hopefully in a short time these people will be investigated and arrested for their crimes. Okay, look, any justice is to be valued. And yes, is Yizbaru v'Yislam Nadvarim, clarity instead of lies. You know, I don't like to talk about this horrendous crimes that were perpetrated, but yet should there be justice in that way? By all means, that's part of the Yizbaru v'Yislam Nadvarim. And in that spirit, someone else writes regarding the war now, what is it going to take for people around the world to wake up and realize the Hamas terrorists are the bad guys trying to commit genocide and Israel are the good guys stopping them? It seems the war is not just against Hamas, but against half the world that supports the terrorists. So it's the same thing. It's a confusion. And an easy is Yizbaru v'Yislam Nadvarim. That's why it's so important that we speak about it and we share with others and we make clear what is morality, what is right, and what is wrong. So to me, it's all part of that process, that Yizbaru v'Yislabnu process, which is so vital today. So besides actual enemies fighting you physically and they're a threat, there's the confusion in the minds, the brainwashing, the propaganda. All part of this process. A lot more to talk about on this, but let's move, because time is precious here and limited. What do these week's Torah portions teach us about today's war? What do we learn from the central theme of this parsha? So the parsha is Boy, and Boy, interestingly, is a parsha that seemingly could have been split into two parshas. The first part of the parsha still talks about the deep Golus and the last Makas even, plagues, the worst ones. And then suddenly the parsha changes tone. Moshe is outside and Hashem comes to him, and tells him in 2 weeks there will be the geulah. And we see Taka, that's what happens. Be'etzem hayom hazeh, on the 15th of Nisan, the full moon of that month, comes the geulah. What do you see? The Golus and Geulah in the same chapter, the darkest and the brightest. As I said, it's easier to finish the story of Golus and start a new chapter. No, because Golus is a part of geulah. It's a stepping stone, just like the moon. The new moon is completely not visible. The full moon is very visible. Hashem says to Moshe, when does the Chiddush begin, the renewal? With the full moon, but you don't see with the new moon. You don't see a moon yet. But it's part of the process. If you don't have the new moon, you're not going to have a full moon. Renewal, the word Chiddush. And indeed, that's what happens. So the lesson is very clear. Even though we may be in the dark, but the Atam Achayas Kulam, like it says in chapter 14, in Basi L'Gani, even in the Klippus, even in the darkest of dark of Mitzrayim, even when Yosef was in Mitzrayim, he maintained preserved his integrity, his connection, because Elokus does not get affected by being in this dark place. But we need to reveal it. So comes the geulah right there, middle of Parsha Bo, right in the depths, right in the darkness of the abyss of Mitzrayim, which teaches also about today. Even whatever darkness we face, the geulah lies embedded in there, waiting to be released, unleashed. Does matzah serve as a lesson in the humility we need today? If eating matzah represents humility, and we needed that extra dose of humility in order to be able to be redeemed from Golus Mitzrayim, is it possible we need to eat matzah today for an extra dose of humility in order to be redeemed from Golus and be able to see the era of Moshiach? Absolutely. Obviously, matzah is a mitzvah for Pesach, but it's in this week's parsha, matzah. So the ruchnis of matzah, which is bittul, lachameni, the bittul of matzah, is absolute necessity. Bittul is the answer to all issues in life. Ego is the source of all root of all problems. Bittul is the source for strength, the ability to get yourself out of the way and access deeper strengths. So absolutely, humility would be, if everyone had humility, we would not have all the problems. And that's where humility brings geulah, brings Elokus into this world. What does the Eibishter say? Ein ani v'hu, God says about an arrogant person, I and him cannot reside under the same canopy. There's no room. When you're a filled cup, you're filled with yourself. There's no room for God to emerge, God in a revealed way. So humility is the lesson of matzah. Another question, which really connected to last week's parsha, but let's go through it as well. Will new names of Hashem be revealed to us in the geulah? Do we already know all the names of Hashem and the energies they represent, or during the geulah of Moshiach, will Hashem reveal some new names he never revealed before, just like he revealed Shem Havaya to Moshe in order to give us the energy we needed to leave Mitzrayim, as we discussed last week's program? The answer is, the Pasuk says it. Vayeh bayem ahu. What does it say? Lo said love, it said Vayeh bayem ahu yeh Hashem echad u'shmei echad. What does that mean then? And today it's not Hashem echad u'shmei echad. So today we say Shem Havaya, loike shunichtem chachu nikra. The way it's written is not the way we pronounce it. So Chassidus explains the Basi L'Gani, the Rebbe explained it a few years ago in the Basi L'Gani. What does that mean? That the gili, the kri, when you read it, it's not aligned with the way it's written. L'asad lavei, gili alakus will permeate all of existence, so it will be one seamless. What you read is what you see, is what you get. What you see, what you read is what you what you read is what you pronounce. And that definitely says there will be a higher level of giluyim, havaya, havaya d'leila, and even higher levels, all the way to anochi, and even higher than that. The highest levels of gilui elokuz, because gilui elokuz, that's what it means, the highest names. So Mitzrayim required going to havaya that the ovis only had Shem Shaddai, or havaya d'latata. So Mitzrayim was Megal havaya d'leila, and L'osad Lov will be even higher names. The Eitzir of L'mayla Mala Aden Ketz, and even higher, Hela Ma'atzmi will be revealed then. Okay. So let us transition now to a sad chapter that happened this past week. And I always prefer ignoring or avoiding these type of topics, but not in Machsid Ma'alav Chassidus applied, because this is a forum that's meant to address all issues. So I can't tell you how many questions on this topic. We'll call it the chaos in 770. What are we to make of the chaos this week in 770? As I said, it very saddens me to talk about, for obvious reasons. Such a holy place, the Rebbe Shul. So it's one thing when you see chaos and you see behavior outside of a holy shul, especially a shul like 770. Even then it's terrible. But in a shul where the Rebbe would say time and again, there's 10 years that my father-in-law, the Frierdiker Rebbe, from Tafshin till Tafshin Yud, davened and learned and prayed and took Yechidus and even cried. Then you could add those 10 years, you could add from Tafshin Yud till today. The Gashmias, Tafshin Yud till Tafshin Nun Daled. So you add another 44 years. And then everything that's happened since. So we're talking about a place that's, the Rebbe calls Beis Moshiach, Gematria 770, 770 Gematria Farasta, which answers another question someone said. Did the Rebbe say that 770 is Gematria Beis Moshiach? Yeah, look in Kuntas Beis Rabbeinu Sheba Bovel, there's a footnote. And other times, a place like that, which is the center, Beis Rabbeinu Sheba Bovel, the center of Teira and Chassidus. Anything that should happen there that is not perfect is already terrible. Imagine things that happened. And I don't want to repeat everything that happened. Everyone knows, gone viral, unfortunately, with all the conspiracy theories. But we still need to know, just like we need to know how to address positive things, we also need to know how to address something like this. So for me, I go only to one source for everything, the Rebbe himself. Then you're safe. Go to Eiserne Brick, an iron bridge that's unwavering. What would the Rebbe say? What would the Rebbe do? So instead of us all going into opinions, what very saddens me even more than the event itself is how everybody uses it to justify and to start their own agendas. Oh, this shows that this one should be in power. This shows that that one should be in power. Ask only one question. What would the Rebbe say? And that's what we have to do. And not personalize it. And not personalize it for other agendas. You know, some people can't distinguish the two. I was on an interview and someone said to me, a big interview, and he said to me that someone told him, someone from the community, that's all about believing that the Rebbe is Moshiach. Since they believe the Rebbe is Moshiach, then it led to this type of vandalism. So I said to him, what do you think? He said, I don't see the connection. This is a secular journalist. What's the connection? Why would they break down a wall? Because the Rebbe is Moshiach. So you see, conflating things is not always a healthy thing to do. That means there's an agenda. So let's address this, hopefully as thoroughly as I can, and I try to do it through the lens of Chassidus, through the lens of the Rebbe. So what should be our attitude to the mayhem occurring in 770 this week? And what should our response be? What would the Rebbe say about rogue bochrim vandalizing the holy shul of 770? So let's begin with that. So a few things here. First of all, the Rebbe's approach to bochrim has always been that bochrim have an anhola. You don't do whatever you want. This is true for everybody, but especially bochrim. Doesn't matter what your intentions are and so on. Some people say bochrim always were the pioneers. They did things wild. Yeah, but not hipach halacha, and not vandalism, and not destruction. Someone tried to compare what happened back in the Tafshin Chof Ches, when they were expanding 770 or later years. Yeah, but they were cooperating. They were working with people who were expanding the shul, and they were, Bochum helped to achieve it. It wasn't they suddenly came and broke something. So the mere fact that that anyone would do something, al pi halacha, you're not allowed to damage the shul, period. It's an isser. Different opinions, isser daraisa, derabonan. Especially bochum in yeshiva. This is what they're busy with. You're supposed to be learning Torah all the time. When bochum didn't come to a minyan and they came to the Rebbe's house, the Rebbe said, "What are you doing by my house? What are you doing by my house? You belong by a minyan." And there they weren't doing anything that was destructive. You're not where you're supposed to be. When bochum used their hands, and I'm not comparing because it's not exactly the same story, what did the Rebbe say? He talked to David Raskin, he told him, I hear there was Yudayim Yudei Esav. So tell them, unless they correct it, and they do tshuva and everything, they should pack their peklach and send them where he wanted to send them. So there's not even a question. There's nothing to do with intentions. And you could say the passions of bochum, and bochum do sometimes wild things. No, this behavior is crossing a line. When bochum were hanging out in the streets and wasting time after Hey Tavis, what did the Rebbe say? Look at the Rebbe's reaction. What are they doing in the streets? Shos nachanant, counting the flies. When you're supposed to be learning Torah. A bochum is supposed to be kol in yoneh learning Torah. Every sikha, every mimer talks about that. So that's a given. But it's critical not to use it for your own agenda. That's not appropriate. That's already one crime and another crime. So what do you taka do in a situation like that? So the Rebbe said, pakin the peklach. So it really is a symptom. It's a symptom of a problem. That's not the cause of the problem. Yes, the pictures, the sensational part of it got everyone's attention. But what's really happening here? There's a vacuum. There's supposed to be gaboyim. There's rabbonim. There are moizdis. There's agudas chidei Chabad. There's merkez. There's machne Yisrael. Each have their role. So I'm not going to go now into the details of their cooperation and communication with each other. But why is there a vacuum in the first place? And again, I say this what the Rebbe would say. By Fabrengens, the Rebbe said, where are the Simon B'Reshechem, the people that are supposed to be the Anholas? Where are the Rabbonim? Where are all these people? Not only should have prevented it, but deal with it. So I'm not a Rav that's going to paskin here. But you have to know who the names are. You have to talk to their families. They cause damage. You know, damages cost money. Maybe they need to be penalized financially. And you have to give them the opportunity to do tshuva, by all means. And to show them the right path. You could say they're kanoim and they're extremists and they're zealots and they're never going to listen. We have to do our part. But as you see, I'm staying away from turning it into some agenda, some other agenda. This happened and this needs to be addressed. And that's what has to be said. I don't know if this is connected to mental health issues of some of these guys, because behavior like that is pretty not normal, frankly. You know, you want to expand 770, that's your justification. So find other ways to do it. There are peaceful ways to do it. It's not the way. And also, this is not exactly expanding anything. I mean, it's just complete insanity to say that. So maybe there's that as well. But also who is responsible for that? Then whole has to know if somebody has mental health issues in the yeshiva. And they have to bring their families into it. The families may say we have no control, but they need to know. Will it lead to this? I can't say. I hope that this would be a wake-up call. What makes this even more disturbing, there's a war going on in Eretz Yisrael. What you should be doing is waking up 4 o'clock in the morning and saying Tillim and learning more and doing more mitzvahs and davening more. And this is what we're busy with. This? That was what the Rebbe was saying, Kedusha, this is what you have to do. Learn Torah. That's what you want to do. You want to bring positive energy into this world. Do it through Torah, mitzvahs. So we have to keep the focus on what is priority here. To turn this now into a war of those that did this and supported and those that not, that's also not the kavan. The people in power should do what they have to do. This is the general approach. Now there's some more details in it, which I'll read some of the questions that came in. How could such a thing happen in the Rebbe's shul, somebody writes. Well, there's always bchira, free will. There's also a lack of, when there's a vacuum, like I said, and there's no leadership, and there's no cooperation. So it creates a tremendous vacuum, and things like this can happen. Talk about Yizbaro v'Yislabna Advarim. Maybe this is meant to expose that. That's not a justification for what happened. But after the fact, it's supposed to wake us up. The Rambam says anything that happens, especially something like this, it's supposed to be a wake-up call. So I don't have an answer. Is it a sign that we are not doing what we have to do, and that's why there's a war in Eretz Yisrael? Because we ourselves have a war within us, in our own community? Maybe. But if it leads to action, that we bring more ardus, and this brings to better relationships, and it creates a situation of more holiness, and never allowing anything like this, God forbid, to ever happen, and even lesser things than this, then you could say maybe that was the purpose of it all. Then you could redeem it that way. I also want to add, not to in any way minimize this, but there are many crimes that have been done and are being done. Some are more pronounced than others. So when someone wants to put this into context, you have to look at also other things. This doesn't mean, again, this needs to be addressed. And two wrongs don't make a right. But I find that some people focus on certain things and they completely ignore other things because they don't look as bad when they can be equally as bad. And the dal lemaven. You don't have to go into all the details. What lessons should we learn from it? Well, the lessons we learn from it are, what are the causes? First of all, the causes in the lack of leadership. Secondly, the causes in the bochim themselves, how misguided they are, where they're putting their priorities, what they see as important. And something has to be done about that. I mean, at the end of the day, we're here to learn Chassidus, to learn Nigla, Mekayim mitzvahs, daven, so that's our shlichus. Why are they involved in things that are completely not to do with their shlichus? What has to do with them? Even expansion of 770, who gave them that shlichus? When the Gaboyim wanted to do something, the Rebbe said to go get permission from Agudas Chassidei Chabad. That's the Gaboyim of the shul, who are responsible for the shul. Who gave Bochum B'chal? It's not their shlichus. So first lesson is, what are we educating our young people? Do they know what their shlichus in this world is? And many other lessons. What can each one of us do about it? Well, what each of us can do about it is not stand on the sidelines. We definitely should not become involved and make the fire bigger. But each of us has to have the clarity and the level-headedness. If you know these bochrim, you know they're friends, speak to them. With kindness, with pressure a bit. It should not be just acceptable. For those that don't, we have to increase even more in Hafatzas Hamayonas Chutza, in spreading the Rebbe's message about Moshiach and geulah, here and everywhere we can reach. We all can do things about it. And to speak clearly what the Rebbe would say. That's our goal. Bring oir into the people. Anon poli yamoma anan, the Rebbe said. Our job is to bring light, we're day workers, to bring light to the world. And you bring light, light dispels darkness. Is this just plain madness, or does it have some redeeming factor? Well, as I mentioned before, in Yiddishkeit, even the worst things always have a redeeming factor. Far worse than this, even. So there's always a redeeming factor. Redeeming factor is you learn from it, you become better. A redeeming factor is those that need to do tshuva. A redeeming factor that all of us need to do perhaps a tshuva and start having a different attitude, what a shul is like. And how we should sanctify a shul. Someone wrote, and I might as well mention it here, like this: did the Rebbe once see scattered papers that accidentally fell on the floor of 770 and got upset and told Rabbi Groner that a shul must always be so clean, even if someone has to get on the ground and clean the floor with his own beard? Yes, there's a video of it. The Rebbe was diving at the Omid. And behind the Omid, he saw papers. And he said that was the custom, that the person, they would go and they would clean the shul with their own beard. The Eigen Abor, the Rebbe said. Imagine how upset the Rebbe would be if he saw vandalism that was done on purpose. And yes, and all the debris that it created. Has the Rebbe ever addressed issues pertaining of how to behave in 770? Has the Rebbe ever threatened to throw someone out for misbehaving? So the Rebbe absolutely addressed it, made machos, walked out of a fabrengen when he saw behavior that he could not deal with. And the Rebbe, like I said before, the Rebbe said, pak de peklach. You know, the word, the Rebbe is not a threatener, but the Rebbe is a halachaid. Behavior that's not acceptable has to be addressed. It has to be corrected. And tshuva has to be done. And mechila has to be asked. And if necessary, yes, you don't let people who are vandals, that's pure criminal behavior. Okay. Can we learn anything positive from these events? Or as that person wrote, what do the tunnels in 770 represent? Is it a good thing? Well, learning anything positive from these events, perhaps, let's go to the next question. Is it possible that this be inspiring us to expand 770? If this would wake people up to what the Rebbe said back in Tavshim Mem Ches and Mem Tes to expand 770, I don't want to say that this was done, even if they had that intention in mind that it was justified, absolutely not. But after the fact that this would create an achdus, that they can expand 770, and that's what we remember when all this becomes a distant memory, we see the expansion, then you could say something positive came out of it. But I want to make it clear, that's not justifying it. And that's not lechatchila saying it has any value. But maybe sometimes people get shocked into action. I wish that would be the case. So we will see. Is it possible that these events, as deplorable as they may be, and the publicity they created, can be used to bring Chassidus to the world and as part of Hashem's plan to bring Moshiach? I would like to believe that that's possible. Again, not justifying it and not waiting for something like this, but I just don't see it happening. I mean, I wish you could say that the millions, hundreds of millions of people that saw this, you can come now out and say, hey, you saw 770, let us tell you what 770 is. It's Gematria Faratzta, Gematria Beis Moshiach. It's a place that's meant to bring Torah to the world, Chassidus to the world. Molor is Deis Hashem Kamayim Liyam Mechasim. You want to know about 770? Let's teach you about 770. I wish I could say that someone is working on a PR campaign like that, a marketing campaign. That would be great. That would be how someone would actually use this and harness it for that purpose. Is that happening? Maybe this seed is being planted as we speak. But if it would be done to that and bring Mashiach, again, I wouldn't thank them for doing this because that's not the way you go. But after the fact, I feel as Danis Nasalei Kazachias. Even the worst possible crimes can be merits when you transform it and harness it for the right direction. Will this finally motivate the powers that be to make order in 770? Well, as I said before, I sure hope so. To make real order and expand it and do whatever the Rebbe wanted it to be would be that would be great. How could Bochum behave this way? I can't justify it. I think it's Bochum that, I don't know, their priorities are off. I don't know how much the learning they're doing. Maybe they are learning. Maybe they don't have direction and guidance of how to learn. A lot of Bochum can have passion. If it's misguided, it can be very destructive. We've seen that in the past. So I don't want to justify how they can behave this way. I just know that once we see it, so there's definitely an education needed here. What should be done to those involved? Should they be punished, arrested? How can we make them aware of their mistake and get them to do tshuva? I don't want to be the one that tells you what should be done. I think you have to do everything possible. Firstly, b'dar keneya, with their families, to make aware this is just the behavior and has to be disciplined and perhaps penalized. I would not arrest them unless there's no choice. If you're talking about people who continue to be a danger, then you do what you have to do. I would follow what the Rabbanim have to say, and it shouldn't be wishy-washy. It should be very direct and guided. Can you make them aware of the mistake and do tshuva? That's, of course, the goal. You definitely have to try to do that. Should we host such bochim in our homes? That's a personal choice. If you think you could be mashpia on them in a positive way, by all means. Should it be a collective punishment not to allow that? I mean, I always believe that if you talk to someone one-on-one, you could probably reach them. But you have to also determine, is the person healthy? Are they normal? Is anyone to talk to? So I do it case by case. How were things like this dealt with in the past? I think I addressed that before. The Rebbe said different things, and he was very strong about it. It was not ignored. There were consequences. And that sums up many of the questions. I do want to read a few that came in that were more detailed. I summed it up very briefly. Here, for many years ago, the Rebbe asked for the community to expand 770. For whatever political reasons, this has not been done yet. The way the Bochum went about attempting to dig a tunnel was dangerous and wrong. But since they already did it, can we say b'di'evet, I mean after the fact, that we are yotze listening to the Rebbe's directives by beginning the process of expanding? No, I would not say that. We're not yotze anything. Yotze is when you actually expand 770 that people can daven in the shul. If anything, this just created a bad taste in everybody's mouth, and it's just horrible in that sense. Can we learn from it? And as I said, that will inspire people to go ahead and expand. I hope that's the case. But no, but this is not being yotze anything. What was it yotze? There's a way to expand. If anything, it put things into danger. Who does such a thing? I didn't even mention that before. The sakana, to touch a structure, let alone in general, but I mean, the whole thing is... So someone else wrote, "Hi Rabbi, I've listened to hours and hours of your classes, lectures, etc. And even though I'm a Lubavitcher who learns Chassidus, there are still many new things you teach me, and I'm truly thankful to you. It means a lot. Here's my question. As much as I love Chassidus and the Rebbe, I always feel uncomfortable the way 770 is ran today. There are so many things that are a mess. I'm sure there's no need for explanation, and especially now with the new news. I'm very sad to see what's happening there in the very shul where the Rebbe would spread light, clarity, and morality. Can you give some clarity on this, and mainly, is there anything we can do to help? This is all a Tednik writing, so I'm sorry for the not proper writing, but I think the point is clear. We should not give up on 770 because Kedusha Le'Zozimim came up. Holiness is there, as I said, saturated with the Frierdiker Rebbe and the Rebbe's work. And the more of us that join, that participate in davening and learning there, the more light comes in. So to give up and say, okay, these crazy people have taken control, that should definitely not be the attitude. And sadness is not enough. I go to 770 when I'm in New York. I go there. Not intentionally. I'm not there to fight with anyone. But I understand this is a shul, the Rebbe shul, and that's what we have to reclaim. If indeed there are people who have hijacked it, So again, pressure has to be put on Gaboim, on Rabbonim, all the other powers that be, and show them that they have a real silent majority, not so silent majority behind it, and are ready to do whatever it takes. You clean out the mess. There's always a few troublemakers and agitators. You definitely have to neutralize them, and then it's much easier to correct everything else. But I don't want to be the one that spells out what yes and what not. Though I have thoughts and opinions on it, but we'd have to address it case by case in a very healthy, objective way, without any side agendas. That to me is a big issue, because side agendas just distort the matter even more. Okay, there are more questions that came in. I just can't, the time is limited here. I want to conclude on a positive note. 770, the Rebbe says, Gematria Faratzta, Gematria Beis Moshiach. It's meant to be a place, and it is a place, which has spawned and given birth to a revolution in the world. The Rebbe's shul, the Rebbe's Beis HaKnesses and Beis HaMedrash, on so many levels. It is saturated, as I said, with the Gedusha, with the Mesiras Nefesh, with the dancing, with the celebrations, everything that happened there. It's time for us to reclaim it. When I say reclaim, it means it should be a place that everybody's comfortable, that follows the guidelines of the Rebbe, le'poches v'le'yeser, le'seser v'le'sigra, not to add, not to subtract, exactly as the Rebbe would want it to be. There may be different opinions, but opinions should not be imposed on anyone. You want to stand and do your thing, you can quietly say whatever you want to say. But don't impose it on anyone else. Let everybody make their choices, standing by a shul. No one should be telling others what to say and what to do. That has to be eliminated. To be a shul that is a based tefillah l'kol ha'amim even. Definitely to all Jews. And everybody should be welcome and feel comfortable. That should be the bottom line goal. The Rebbe's shul, every Eid should be comfortable there. Someone has a halachic demand, or someone has a demand for something, you go to Rabbonim and say, I want this. So I would go about it a clean slate. Start fresh and new. A clean shul, in the spirit of the Rebbe, and not the spirit of any group, not minority, not majority, not left, not right, not extreme this way, not extreme that way. And if someone has, there's a tailor way to address issues, whatever those issues may be. Now, I know it sounds naive because you'll say, who has the power? Everybody doesn't get along with each other. But if anything that can come out of this positive, that should be the thing that comes out of it. And with that, Messiah and B'Tev, that we always believe, the Rebbe always said, that we can always turn things into a positive, even when there were setbacks and even when there was something uncomfortable. So let's hope we can do that together. And the Achdus von Chassidim, von uns führen gegen Moshiach, and like the Rebbe said, in the name of the Tzemach Tzedek and on Yud Gimel Nisan Tavshech Vov, that the Achdus, the unity of Chassidim, will lead us to Moshiach. Should we take it from Yad Mamish as we go into Yud Shevat, Ayin Dalet Shana, 74 years, maybe Basi L'Gani, ultimately the return of the Shechina b'tachtenim, the geulah amitis v'ashlema, dira b'tachtenim, molad is deis Hashem kamayim layom b'chasim. This has been Chassidus Applied, My Life Chassidus Applied. We're here every Sunday, 8 to 9 p.m. Be blessed and kol tov.
This program is brought to you by My Life, Chassidus Applied. Please help us continue our programs. Make even a small contribution at chassidusapply.com/donate.